The floor of the grand lobby gleamed under the bright overhead lights, the marble polished so thoroughly it almost mirrored the movements of those who passed. At one corner, bent over his mop, the janitor worked quietly, every motion precise, every gesture subdued. He was used to silence, used to being unseen, the kind of man people's eyes skipped over without a second thought. He'd been told more than once by his supervisor, "Stay quiet, stay invisible, don't bother anyone." It had become second nature: move, clean, and leave without leaving a trace. Yet, deep inside, the weight of being a single dad, of raising a daughter on his own, gave every step a heaviness that he carried with quiet dignity. He worked for her, for the little girl waiting at home after school, the one whose smile kept him moving even when his back ached and his pride was worn thin. That afternoon, while pushing his mop across the wide expanse of the lobby, he noticed her. A small figure sitting in one of the sleek, modern chairs reserved for visitors, legs swinging nervously above the polished floor. She couldn't have been more than 8 or 9, with her hair neatly brushed, her dress carefully chosen. Yet her eyes darted around with an anxious restlessness, her lips pressed into a tight line. She lifted her hands, moving them in uncertain motions, glancing around to see if anyone would respond. But the receptionist was busy on the phone, the security guard by the door stared at his monitor, and the stream of employees rushing past didn't even look at her. He paused, mop in hand, watching as she tried again, fingers shaping signs, small and hesitant, like questions thrown into the air with no one to catch them. The janitor's chest tightened. He recognized the language instantly. It was the same way his daughter spoke to him every day, the same flowing movements of fingers and hands, the same desperate search for connection. Without realizing it, his feet began moving, carrying him closer to her. He set the mop aside, leaning it carefully against the wall, and crouched down so he could meet her at eye level. She blinked up at him, surprised at first, then wary, as though expecting to be ignored again. Slowly, gently, he raised his hands and signed back, "Hello. Are you waiting for someone?" The change was instant. Her face lit up, her eyes wide with delight, and her small hands flew in response, her signs faster now, filled with excitement. "You can talk like me," she signed, almost breathless with joy. He smiled, nodding. "Yes, I can. I have a daughter who is deaf too. We sign every day." The girl leaned forward eagerly, her earlier loneliness evaporating as she began to chatter with her hands, asking about his daughter, telling him about her school, her favorite colors, the book she was carrying in her lap. He listened intently, answering her with the same warmth he gave his own child, every sign careful and precise, his rough, calloused hands surprisingly graceful in motion. For the first time in what seemed like forever, laughter bloomed on her face, not the kind that made noise, but the kind that sparkled in her eyes and crinkled the corners of her cheeks. Her shoulders relaxed, her small body uncoiling from its earlier tension. She was no longer the lonely girl in the corner of a lobby too big for her, she was simply a child who had found someone who understood. The janitor forgot, for a moment, where he was. Forgot that this wasn't his home, that the polished marble and glass belonged to a world that wasn't his. He forgot about the warning to remain invisible, about the supervisor's stern face reminding him not to speak, not to interfere. All he saw was a little girl, reaching out desperately for connection, and the joy that flooded her when someone reached back. Neither of them noticed the tall figure that had entered the lobby. She came in silently, her heels clicking softly against the marble, her sharp suit cutting a commanding figure that made others instinctively move out of her way. The CEO, a woman known for her unshakable composure, had just returned from a meeting, her mind still swirling with numbers, deals, and deadlines. She was used to control, used to her daughter sitting quietly by the receptionist until she was free. But what she saw as she stepped inside stopped her in her tracks. Her daughter was smiling, smiling with a brilliance she hadn't seen in so long. Her tiny hands moved in rapid, joyous bursts of sign language, her eyes bright and alive. And there, kneeling in front of her, was the janitor. His uniform was worn, his shoes scuffed, his face lined with exhaustion, yet his hands moved with a fluency that startled her, responding to her daughter with ease. The CEO froze, unable to process the sight at first. She had spent months trying to find someone, anyone, who could bridge that silence for her daughter. Tutors, therapists, technology, nothing had seemed to bring out the happiness she longed to see. And here, in the middle of the lobby, a man she had never truly noticed, the man told to be silent, had reached into her daughter's silent world and lit it up. The janitor, realizing only then that she had entered, glanced up. Their eyes met. His smile faltered, and he shifted awkwardly, suddenly aware of the broom leaning against the wall, of the uniform that marked his station, of the invisible line he had just crossed. He half expected her to scold him, to remind him of his place, to tell him to get back to work. He started to rise slowly, hands falling to his sides, the warmth of the moment cooling into dread. But her daughter tugged his sleeve, signing rapidly, "Don't go. Don't stop talking to me." And as the CEO stood frozen, watching her little girl's joy, the silence of the lobby seemed to deepen. Everyone else, the receptionist, the guard, the rushing employees, had stopped to stare. But she saw only two people, her daughter, smiling, and the janitor who had made it possible. Something inside her shifted, something she hadn't let herself feel in years. The man bowed his head slightly, murmuring an apology, but the CEO's throat tightened. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. She just stood there, stunned, her mind caught between disbelief and awe. Her daughter's laughter, silent, yet louder than any sound, was all she could hear. The CEO's world had always been defined by control. Numbers, meetings, negotiations, everything followed a rhythm she dictated, a rhythm she could master. But in that moment, standing frozen in the middle of the glass and marble lobby, she felt that control slip from her fingers. Her eyes were fixed on her daughter, and for the first time in months, maybe longer, the little girl's face was glowing with unfiltered joy. Her small hands moved quickly, elegantly, in patterns the CEO never quite understood, but she didn't need to. The meaning was clear. Her daughter was happy, and it was because of the man kneeling before her. The janitor's hands moved with ease, answering the girl's excited flurry of signs. His expression was gentle, his tired eyes softened as he matched her energy, as if he belonged to the same hidden world she inhabited. The CEO had seen so many attempts, teachers who grew impatient, interpreters who treated her daughter like a task, even technology designed to translate speech into sign, but nothing had unlocked her daughter's heart. She remembered the way her little girl had often turned away, frustrated, her silence sharper than any words. Now, watching her so alive, she felt her throat tighten. The lobby around them seemed to fade into the background. Employees had slowed their pace, some even stopping to watch. The receptionist was leaning forward slightly, eyebrows raised. The guard by the door had his mouth slightly open, stunned. The CEO didn't care about any of them. All she saw was her daughter's smile. She realized, with a pang, how long it had been since she'd seen that smile, the one that didn't just curve lips but lit up her entire face. Her chest ached. How many nights had she stayed late at the office, convincing herself it was for her daughter's future? How many mornings had she rushed out, leaving her child in the care of nannies who never understood her? The guilt pressed hard, and for a moment, she felt like the marble beneath her heels would give way. The janitor noticed her finally, his posture stiffening. His hands slowed, then fell to his lap. The child turned her head to follow his gaze and saw her mother standing there. For a moment, the joy in her face faltered, as though she expected the connection to be snatched away. The janitor rose slowly, awkwardly, brushing invisible dust off his uniform. His head bowed slightly, as if bracing for reprimand. The CEO opened her mouth, but no words came. Her daughter tugged her sleeve, her small hands flying rapidly. "Mom, he understands me. He talks like me. Don't let him go." Her eyes were shining with urgency, the kind that pierced through any barrier of wealth, status, or authority. The CEO's throat burned. She swallowed hard, finally forcing herself to speak, though her voice came out softer than intended. Where did you learn that?" The janitor hesitated. His rough hands fidgeted for a second, then stilled. "My daughter," he said quietly. His voice was deep, humble, carrying the weight of long hours and quiet sacrifices. "She's deaf too. I had to learn. I couldn't let her grow up without someone who understood her." The words landed heavily in the CEO's chest. She looked at his hands, the same hands that moments ago had moved with such grace, then back at his face. There was no arrogance there, no attempt to impress, just honesty, and perhaps a trace of fear. He seemed ready for her to order him back to work, ready to lose even the small moment of connection he'd shared. Her daughter, however, was not ready. She clung to his sleeve, signing furiously, "Don't go. Please, Mom. Please, let him stay." The CEO knelt down in front of her daughter, her sharp suit creasing against the polished floor. She cupped the girl's cheek, forcing her to look at her. Her daughter's eyes brimmed with hope, fragile and desperate. The CEO felt something inside her break. For years, she had been building empires, closing deals worth millions, earning the respect and fear of competitors. But in her daughter's eyes, she saw the one thing she had been failing to give, the gift of being understood. She turned her gaze back to the janitor. "You sign better than the teachers have hired," she admitted, her voice trembling, more vulnerable than she intended. "Better than I ever could." He shifted uneasily, shaking his head. "It's not about being better," he said softly. "It's about being there, listening, even when there's no sound." The simplicity of the statement struck her harder than any boardroom speech she'd ever heard. Being there. She thought about the nights her daughter had cried silently, the times she had felt her child's loneliness but convinced herself money could fill the void. She realized, painfully, that this janitor had shown her daughter more in 10 minutes than she had managed in months. Her daughter signed again, this time slowly, deliberately, so her mother would understand. "He understands me." "You don't." The words stung. The CEO blinked rapidly, her vision blurring. She pulled her daughter into her arms, holding her tightly, as though she could make up for years of distance in a single embrace. The girl leaned into her, but her eyes remained fixed on the janitor, unwilling to let the connection vanish. The CEO finally rose to her feet, holding her daughter's hand. She looked at the janitor, her expression a mixture of gratitude, shame, and something unspoken. Around them, the lobby had grown quiet, the employees pretending to work while sneaking glances. It didn't matter. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice low, meant only for him. "You've given her something I couldn't." He shook his head, almost embarrassed. "I didn't do anything. I just spoke to her. That's all." But it wasn't just that. The CEO knew it. In his quiet defiance of invisibility, he had changed everything. Her daughter's world was brighter, her own walls were cracking, and in that unexpected moment, a janitor had become the most important man in the room. As he bent to pick up his mop, as though trying to fade back into the background, the CEO's voice stopped him. It was steadier now, firmer, carrying the authority she was known for, but softened by something rare. "Don't go back to being invisible. Not after this." Her daughter squeezed her hand, and for the first time in a long time, the CEO let the tears fall.